Good morning to you. Merry Christmas to you. All the veterans who are here, thank you for your service. We appreciate you. We honor you. And as president, you'll have somebody that will do that every day while in office. You know, someone was asking me the other day about, what about something that when you were deployed in Iraq and this and that, and we started talking about different things that happened. One of the things that was interesting when I was deployed. So this was back in like 2007, which in terms of technology was kind of a long time ago. You know, we take for granted, like I see all you with your phones. We didn't have those smartphones back then. You couldn't do things like FaceTime. You know, you could email and things like that, but people that were deployed, connecting with their loved ones was not as easy as it is now. And my wife now, we were not married at the time. We were dating, and I was planning on proposing when I got back from Iraq. She was a news reporter in Northeast Florida. And so I actually arranged to gain access to a satellite phone on Valentine's Day. And I talked to her co-host, and I actually piped in from Iraq live on the air. Total surprise to her, and wished her a happy Valentine's Day from the desert in Fallujah. And I didn't see what was going on at the time, but I've since seen, I saw the replay later. She was pretty shocked to get that phone call live on the air. And she was just, and then she kind of got her sea legs, and then she kind of did what she would do. But I kind of think about it, that was like a big deal. People had been missing Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, all that stuff. And it was the same guys that were going over and over again. You know, I was there, one tour, but there were guys in the Marines and Army who were there 13 months, 15 months at a time. And there was a lot placed on the shoulders of a very small number of people. This country's not doing what it needs to be doing for our veterans. I think it would be good to have a president who's actually a veteran for the first time in a long time. It'll make a difference. And part of it is, yes, there's a lot we need to do with the military. When you see things like social experimentation, woke ideology, this stuff in the military, that is detrimental to morale. That kills mission accomplishment. It's obviously hurt recruiting. It's not the way you run a military. So as Commander-in-Chief, I understand that. On day one, we take all of that nonsense out of the military. We start focusing on the mission, and we focus on promoting people based on merit and achievement again. And that's going to cause morale to go up. That's going to cause recruiting to go up. So you do need to do that, and that's really, really important. But it's also the case of just somebody that's been there, having a sense of what some of our vets are going through. There's a lot, we could do a lot better job. We've actually done a much better job in Florida with a lot of the things that we've been able to do. But I think even probably more important than all that, what I would bring, the reason I joined after 9/11 was because I believe in this country, and I believe in putting service above self. As your president, it's not going to be about me. It's not going to be about my issues. It's going to be about you. Be about your family. It'll be about the issues that affect this country, and that'll be my sole focus as we get in there on day one. Never look back and knock out all these issues that we need to. And Chip mentioned, I've delivered as governor 100% of the promises. When I said I was going to do something, I did it. I don't say things idly. When I'm doing it, I think about how I'm going to actually get it accomplished. And so we'll be able to go in there, and I think we'll be able to provide a number of things. One, Republicans need a president that will fight for them. We have too many people that get elected to Washington. Chip sees them all the time. They run saying they're going to do all these great things. The minute there's any heat, they don't fight for you. They cave, and then the left and the Democrats win. Time and time again, this is happening in Washington, D.C. I have a record of when it's tough, digging in and fighting for the people I represented. Chip mentioned during COVID, we bucked Fauci. We stood strong for open schools and businesses, and against the vax mandates and vax passports. I got hammered for doing that by the media, by the left, even by a lot of Republicans. A lot of people told me that I was making a huge mistake and I would never be able to, to get elected, reelected, all this stuff. But leadership, what I had to do as a leader, I had to stand up for the people I represented. I had to care more about their freedoms and their jobs than I did about protecting my own political hide. And so we stood in the breach. We fought for the people of my state, and as a result, our state has never done better in the entire history of Florida than it's doing now. Other example, when we have this craze in this country of trying to sexualize curriculum in school. As a father of a first grader, kindergartner, and preschooler, my wife and I believe that kids should be able to go to school, kids should be able to watch cartoons, just be kids, without having an agenda shoved down their throat. It's wrong to teach a kindergartner that they were born in the wrong body or that their gender is a choice. And so we had to stand up for that in Florida with legislation to protect parents' rights, which is great, right? But the left didn't like it, the media didn't like it, but that's to be expected. But then we had the most powerful company in our history, Disney, came after us for just trying to protect kids. And this is supposed to be a company that's dedicated, to family. And a lot of people said, you're not going to be able to get this done. There's no way. They always get what they want and everything. But I got elected to stand up for and fight for the people of my state. I did not get elected to subcontract out my leadership to a woke corporation based in Burbank, California. And so we fought, and we got the job done. The other thing we need to do is win again. Republicans have been losing at the ballot box, but also losing on a lot of policies in Washington, D.C. I mean, has the border gotten any better? Have any of these issues gotten better? You just haven't seen it. And part of winning is, yes, the election. And I can tell you, in Florida, we won election like nobody thought was possible. The biggest Republican victory in the history of the state of Florida. In a governor's race just in 2022. We were winning areas people didn't think was possible, and we did that by leading with bold colors, not with pale pastels. We delivered big results, and we were able to attract a huge number of voters. We need to do that nationwide. Your governor here, Governor Reynolds, showed how you can do that in Iowa by having a great agenda. I'm proud that she's supporting me for president in the Iowa caucus. I don't like the fact that Donald Trump has attacked her because she's supporting me. You know what? If a Republican is not supporting me and they're doing a good job, good on them. I want them to do well. It's not all about you. It's about a larger mission here. And when he's attacking her, that's for self-serving reasons, and that is wrong. Incidentally, he's now running commercials where she's pretending, and she said yesterday, that's just misleading Iowa voters. She has not endorsed him in 24. She's endorsed me, but she's shown how it's done too. So we need to do that. We need to do that nationally. And I can tell you, who does the media and the Democrats not want us to nominate? They don't want me to be nominated because they attack me more than they attack other people. Wall Street funding a lot of these attacks on me on TV. It's obvious. They're telling you who they're scared of. They're telling you. And they're also telling you who they want to see nominated, because the Democrats have a playbook that they can run against the former president that has been successful how many years in a row now? 18, 20, 22, the midterm, the off year. They know what they're going to do. It's baked in the cake, and they will run that playbook the minute they have to. That is not going to put us in a position to be able to win. But even more important than that, once you get in there, are you just going to be a potted plant? Are you actually going to be an energetic president that gets this stuff done? In Florida, I'm the only one running who can say, I'm the only one running for president can say, I have defeated the left on issue after issue. You see the Republicans caving. You see them losing all across the country. Not in Florida. We beat the teachers union by enacting universal school choice. We beat Fauci on COVID. We beat Soros on crime by removing 2 of these radical left prosecutors who were not enforcing the law. We beat the Democrats on election integrity, and we now have a ban on ballot harvesting and a universal voter ID, and we now are fighting with and beating the left on our policy to ban China from purchasing land in the state of Florida. So on issue after issue, we're beating the people that are causing the problems in this country. I'm showing you how to do it. And then the final thing is this country needs leadership. We need somebody, and leadership's not entertainment. Leadership's not about showmanship. Leadership's about articulating a vision that's going to move this country in a better direction, and then dedicating yourself in office to executing on that vision and delivering results for the people that elected you in the first place. We showed how that's done in Florida. That's the type of president I will be. It's not going to be about my issues. It's not going to be about things that aren't ultimately important to you. It's going to be about the things that matter to you, that matter to this country, that we're going to have our focus. And we will be focused, and we will be disciplined. Look, when you get up there, the bureaucracy is going to revolt, the media is going to revolt, the left, the Democrats, a lot of these establishment Republicans are not going to necessarily like to see change. But we need a change agent. We need somebody that's going to be able to lead through that so that we can return this government to its rightful owners, which is we, the American people. I'm the guy that's going to be able to lead and get that done. I've shown how to do it in Florida, and we'll be able to do that as the next president of the United States. Chip and I are going to take questions in a minute, but the final thing I'll just say is this. I'm motivated to run because my wife and I have a first grader, kindergartner, and preschooler. We're in jeopardy as a country of being the first generation of Americans to leave to our kids and grandkids an America less prosperous and less free than the one we inherited. And if that were to happen, we'd be the first generation of Americans in history to do such a thing. We'd be breaking faith with every generation of Americans going all the way back to the founding of the country. But I'm also motivated by the debt of gratitude that we owe people that have come before us and that have fought and sacrificed so that we can be free. When the founding fathers created the Constitution, they understood that freedom was fragile. Benjamin Franklin walked out of that Constitutional Convention. He was asked, did you give us a republic or a monarchy? He said, a republic if you can keep it. Because they understood you could have the best Constitution in the world, you can have the best Declaration of Independence in the world. Those things do not run on autopilot. They require every generation of Americans to step up and defend freedom when it's threatened, sometimes even having to put on a uniform, risking your life, and giving the last full measure of devotion for service to this country, as many have done over many generations. Now, we are not called upon to make sacrifices of that nature. But what we are called upon to do is to preserve what George Washington called the sacred fire of liberty. This is the fire that burned in Independence Hall in 1776 when 56 men pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to create a new nation conceived in liberty. It's a fire that burned at the cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, when our nation's first Republican president pledged this nation to a new birth of freedom. It's a fire that burned on the beaches of Normandy when a merry band of brothers stormed the shores, defeated the Nazis, and preserved liberty throughout the world. It's a fire that burned in 1987 at the foot of the Berlin Wall when a resolute Republican president stood in front of that wall and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, and facilitated the end of the Soviet Union shortly thereafter. This is our responsibility, to carry that torch and preserve the sacred fire of liberty. It's not a responsibility I walk away from. It's a responsibility that I welcome. I will get, yes, sir. As your nominee, I will get the job done, not just with the presidential election, the Congress, the Senate, the state legislatures. It's going to be a rising tide lifting all boats. We will win again. As a leader, I'll always conduct myself in a way that you can be proud of. And as your president, I can promise you this, I will not let you down. Thank you all. God bless. Let's take some questions. Come on, Chip. Anybody got any questions? Yes. Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's an intelligence operation by the Chinese. I know Chip has worked on that as well. It's poisoning our kids. They're collecting massive amounts of data. So yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is CCP. I mean, TikTok is just one of many things where they're exercising influence over our society. No, I agree. So look, in Florida, we banned China from buying land. One of the few states to do that. No farmland, no land near military bases. A lot of people, some of these guys on Wall Street didn't like that. But the reality is I got to look out for the safety and security of my state. And I don't think it's good. I think especially when you talk about agriculture, food security is part of our national security. Why would we want a hostile country to be gobbling up more of that? We also ejected them from our universities. Things like Confucius Institutes that they put in, that spews CCP propaganda. There's no place for that. China has been very devious in how they've gotten into universities. And I think this problem of funding these universities with this foreign money has gotten totally out of hand. And I think it's a big, big problem. And we also crack down on Chinese espionage and stealing our trade secrets. So we have a record of doing it. I think there's a lot of people. It's not just what the CCP has done. There's so many people in this country that benefit from them and make a lot of money from that. And the question is that more important than the security of our country? Of course it's not. China is the #1 threat that we face as Americans. I'm not saying there aren't others, but the way I view it, people talk about what's happening in the Middle East. People talk about what's happening in other parts of the world. It's all important, but if we don't get China right, none of that other stuff's going to matter very much. If we get China right, everything else becomes manageable. And so we've got a lot of work to do to be able to ensure that the 21st century is not a Chinese century, but is an American century.
Yeah, and I agree with the governor completely, and I'll just add a little bit, which is to say, well, one of the first bills I was one of the first guys to introduce a bill to ban Chinese Communist Party ownership of farmland. I just don't think we should allow it. Why on earth would we do that, right? And it shouldn't just be done at the state level. There ought to be a federal approach to that, particularly anywhere near federal installations. But it's a national security issue. I mean, Iowa produces food for the world. I mean, why are we going to let the Chinese Communist Party own our land and own our production facilities? So we ought to attack that head on. We ought to deal with TikTok head on. It's not just what they're doing to our youth and poisoning their minds from the standpoint of technology and going after them. And, 55% of abductions of children is done with devices, targeting them. TikTok's one of the purveyors of that stuff. It's also poisoning their minds with respect to supporting Hamas over Israel. It's insane. Why would we allow that to occur? And, I think I agree with Governor DeSantis. There are things we can do federally, but it takes leadership to do it. I mean, with all due respect to Governor Haley, she was trying to attract more Chinese businesses into South Carolina, has been doing so unapologetically, and unapologetically saddling up with the Wall Street crowd with respect to all of the money and the investors that are all in bed with China. So I think those are real issues that we need to address. I agree with the governor.
Yes. Is that a Florida State sweatshirt? Okay, well, I can tell you there's a lot of disappointment throughout the state of Florida that the College Football Playoff Committee excluded an undefeated conference championship from the playoffs. And Chip is here as a Texas Longhorn, and so they got in with one loss. But so did Alabama, got in with one loss. And, we did the debate a couple weeks ago in Tuscaloosa, the Lace Republican debate, and that was the Wednesday after the committee cut Florida State. So it was a little bit bittersweet for me showing up in Tuscaloosa. But it's interesting that Alabama fans were so nice about it, and they were sympathetic because they go almost every year. So it's like, for us, we used to be the college football powerhouse back in the 80s, 90s, and part of the next decade. But then last 10 years has kind of been a dry spell, which is, it's fine. We navigate it. My problem is, I told my kids, so our kids are, I'm not I'm a Tampa Bay Bucks fan. I have allegiances, but on college I don't. I didn't go to any of the schools. So I want them to all do well just as governor. But my kids, because we live in the governor's residence, they have become Noles. They go to games. They've done not just football, baseball, soccer, you name it. And so the kids were excited about the playoffs. And I told them about a month ago, I said, listen, kids, if Florida State wins all their games, they will go to the playoff because there's going to be 4 or less undefeated teams. And sure enough, that didn't happen. And they were Daddy, you said they were going to the playoffs. My son now, though, 5, he understands that the committee really made a big mistake. And so at least we're gotten to where Dad wasn't misleading. It was all about the committee.
It wasn't just you. It was Kirk Herbstreit. He kept saying it on SportsCenter every Sunday on game day.
I know. Well, that's a great question. And if you remember back in 2016, in the midst of the Republican primaries, Justice Scalia passed away. And so that seat was open. The Republicans were not going to confirm a liberal appointee, and they made that clear. And then, so the outcome of the presidential election would determine who would be able to replace Justice Scalia. And so if you look at the modern court, you have Thomas, who is currently the best justice, Alito, who's very close, and then Scalia was in that league too. So that was a really big deal. Honestly, when I was campaigning in 2016 for Trump, there were a lot of conservatives that were like not hot on voting for him because he had a very liberal past. I mean, he had been for gun control, partial birth abortion, all these things. And the thing that I used to get them to come out was the court. I was like, he has a list. He's going to promise to pick off the list and do. And so that was, I don't think, we probably wouldn't have won 2016. I think that was one of the huge motivators for Republicans to come out in that one. We don't see that as clearly right now because there's not a vacancy. But the next president very well may be called upon to replace not only Justice Thomas, but maybe Justice Alito. And those are the two top conservative jurists on the court, and by a pretty considerable distance. So if you look at Donald Trump appointed 3 justices, I think the justices he appointed are good justices. I don't think that there's necessarily a suitor amongst those 3. But if you look at how they've performed, none of them are at the level of Thomas or Alito. So the issue is if you're replacing Clarence Thomas with somebody like Kavanaugh, who's a good judge, that moves the court to the left. If you replace Alito with a Kavanaugh, that moves the court to the left. That's just the reality. So I think as president, I'll be somebody that understands, first, what the proper role of the court is, what the proper way to interpret the Constitution is, but also what makes somebody like a Clarence Thomas and a Sam Alito an exceptional justice. And yes, you got to be smart, but almost any of these guys are going to be smart. You got to have the proper understanding of the Constitution. Everyone will at least give lip service to that. But what you really got to have is the intestinal fortitude and the backbone to apply the Constitution and the law as written when you know that's going to lead to blowback from the media, from the left, from law professors, from the legal profession. And the justices that want to be liked by those people, they're the ones that tend to drift and go to be more liberal over time because that's how you ingratiate yourself. And I think what I like about Clarence and Sam Alito is that they don't care what the media says about them. They don't care what liberal law professors say about them. They have a duty to uphold the Constitution, and that takes precedent over anything of these other matters. So maybe they don't get invited to as many cocktail parties. Maybe they don't get honored at some of these liberal law schools, or if they do show up, they get heckled or whatever. But that's a small price to pay for knowing that you're upholding the liberties of the American people. Because when courts do their job properly, you have more freedom. Your freedoms are more secured. When courts go outside their proper role and legislate from the bench and try to invent law and invent provisions of the Constitution, even if you like a particular political decision, the sum total of that is your freedoms are less secure because our constitutional system is getting out of whack. So I've done court in Florida. I had the most liberal Supreme Court when I became governor. I've made a number of appointments. We now have the most conservative Supreme Court in the entire country. I understand what it takes to make these selections. I am not going to rely on outside groups giving me a list. I'll be consulting with a lot of people, but you know the types of people that you're looking for, and it's approach to the Constitution, aptitude, but backbone. That's really, really important.
I'll just add one thing real quick, which is, I could not agree more. I mean, the 3 justices that President Trump appointed, they're very good justices, but they are not in the same league, in my view, in terms of being able to stand up for us as Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, as Scalia was. You got the John Roberts kind of influence, the wing, right, the political wing, which is the cocktail circuit wing, which is read the headlines wing. And you want justices who are going to just stare right back at it and do the right thing based on the Constitution and the rule of law. And why does this matter? Because they're going to come after our Second Amendment rights. They are going to decide what free speech looks like, right? There is a member of parliament in Finland who was being prosecuted for daring to say that she believed marriage was between one man and one woman. That's all she said. She just quoted scripture. She was being prosecuted under the law in Finland. That is coming to a theater near you. And the only line between us and that is a Supreme Court willing to stand on the bedrock of the Constitution and be willing to stare down the headlines that'll be written by the press. That's the kind of people that we need, like Clarence Thomas. I will say, as a funny aside, high water mark for me politically, which I will never eclipse, was being in Lukenbach, Texas, which I represent in Central Texas, the famous song, Willie Nelson, with Clarence Thomas, sitting at a bench with a dude strumming a guitar and a chicken and a rooster, and then a couple of bikers coming along going, "Are you Clarence Thomas?" And he looks at him, he goes, "Yeah," and they go, "We love you, man." And it was really the high water mark for me politically.
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, I'll let Chip kind of get into that, because I think if you look, I mean, you have a right to know how your tax dollars are being spent, especially if they're being spent overseas in a foreign country. And we already know there have been tens of billions of dollars of your tax dollars spent to pay salaries for bureaucrats in Ukraine, to pay pension payments to bureaucrats in Ukraine, to fund small business ventures in Ukraine, to fund agriculture subsidies in Ukraine. And you got to ask yourself, how is that the responsibility of the American taxpayer? And I think that they basically have no end in sight about in terms of what they want, and they are fighting tooth and nail the accountability. When I was back in the day, when I was in the U.S. House, I was the head of the National Security Oversight Committee, and I did the Afghanistan oversight stuff. And what happened in Afghanistan, the amount of ridiculous waste that was done was just absolutely appalling. I'd be willing to bet that you're going to see that in Ukraine and then some. And, you know, the problem with Ukraine is like, look, I'm rooting for them over Russia. Obviously, Russia's the aggressor. But the corruption in Ukraine is endemic, and it is real. And so when money's going over there, I mean, people are trying to get their hands on it. And I think that people in Congress that are fighting for transparency, I think, are absolutely doing the right thing.
I agree with the governor. I mean, look, it was no accident that a year ago, right almost now, maybe actually this week, that the $1.7 trillion Nancy Pelosi omnibus spending bill that got jammed through the Senate, okay, with 17 Republican votes supporting it in the Senate, that Zelensky addressed Congress that month, that week, right? That's not an accident, right? That was purposeful. And it was no accident that Zelensky was back up at the Hill just last week. Also was on the Hill last September. So he's waging a war. I understand why he wants our support. I understand why it's in American interest that Putin not march through Ukraine and go into Eastern Europe. We've got Eastern European allies. We've got Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, who are right there on the front lines as Eastern Europeans. They're actually upholding their end of the bargain by giving more of their GDP to try to defend and help Ukraine. Where are the Western Europeans, right? Where are those guys who are riding on the back of you, riding on the back of the American taxpayers while we borrow more money? $113 billion that we're sending over to Ukraine while we've got 300,000 a month encounters at our border, over 2 million gotaways. We don't know who they are. Like, we need to secure our border, focus on a sovereign and secure and strong America. I'm not a, never Ukrainer in the sense of saying we shouldn't be there to try to provide some lethal aid as necessary to hold the line on Putin. But a blank check, we are not the world's ATM. We got an inspector general, we Republicans, embedded in one of the appropriations bills we were fighting for this summer. We're fighting for transparency. But at the end of the day, we need the willpower, we need leadership to force Congress to hold the line, because I can promise you, I mean, it's an amoeba up there trying to get people to hold the line for you in Congress. So I'm going to keep trying, but it is an uphill climb with a 3 or 4 person majority with a handful of my colleagues who are all too willing to use the military as an excuse and standing with our men and women as an excuse to continue to fund the very endless engagements of conflict that are causing such a stress and a burden on our men and women in uniform.
What's your name? Deb. Great question. So about health care and particularly how we have these massive conglomerates. And I think if you think about our healthcare system, you got big pharma, big insurance, and you've got big government. You got now big hospitals. I mean, it's like big, and it's about moving money around those entities. The doctor and the patient are at the back of the bus. The patient is almost an afterthought here, and those incentives are going to continue to produce the type of results that we need to. So I think we need to shake up the entire system. I think we need to. I mean, I've actually done stuff in Florida that's made a difference. We've even fought. I mean, I'm fighting Biden on the pharmaceutical drugs. I found one of my colleagues that I worked with, who was a Speaker of the House at the time in Florida. This was when Trump was president. Found a provision of law that said HHS and FDA can approve a state just buying the same drug in Canada that's in the United States, and obviously that would be much cheaper to do. So I went to Trump and I applied, and he said he was for it. So they tried to move it forward, didn't get it done before he left office, and that application's been pending there. Biden has sat on it now for almost 3 years. I think we're finally going to get a decision at the beginning of next year to be able to do. But I would be able to buy the same drug. We looked at it. The same drug is like 80% cheaper and just doing that. I have a warehouse ready to relabel everything. And look, I mean, I'm just trying to deliver value for people, but it's just crazy how much all this stuff costs. I also think it's just, you think about the quality of medical care. Coming out of med school now, it's harder to go into private practice and be like a family doctor. That was like what a lot of people wanted to do. Now, most of the physicians are employees of these big hospital conglomerates. I think that's probably not as a significant thing that people would want to go through all this training to do if that's where you're likely to end up. So I do think you're going to see some talented people. Maybe you already are, but I think given the problems of the healthcare, you're going to start seeing some talented people not even want to go into medicine to begin with. Well, we need more nurses. I mean, like, you don't have enough nurses to meet demand. So in Florida, we launched a big program to dramatically increase slots that we send to state colleges and other things for various nursing programs. So we did that 2 years ago. So we're putting our money where our mouth. My mom's a retired nurse, so I know a lot about it. But we're doing that because, and COVID really shook a lot of this up. People could make a lot of money as a traveling nurse. That was like a cottage industry. I think that's probably in the rearview mirror now. But you still have fallout from that. So yes, we need to facilitate more nurses. 100%, I'm all for it.
And I'll just add one thing on the healthcare. As a cancer survivor, and I went through this. One of the reasons I ran for Congress, right? And I had I would be on Obamacare as a member of Congress. I'm on my wife's plan, but I wouldn't be able to go to MD Anderson, where I got cancer treatment right now in Obamacare. I have a constituent who's calling me up. She's stage 3, maybe stage 4, and she can't go to MD Anderson on Obamacare. We sold America a bill of goods that they were going to be covered and fine with a system that is now destroying our healthcare system. It is now insurance company run, government regulated, health management. It is not health care. It isn't. We've destroyed that system, and we should just go on offense on that. We shouldn't be afraid of that. Republicans curl up in the corner and they go, oh my God, they're going to say the word pre-existing conditions. We are all walking pre-existing conditions. We're human beings. So we should run right into that storm, and we should go out with healthcare freedom, is what I call it, and empower you. Give you the same benefit that corporations get. Let you have the ability to control that money rather than giving the corporations the big benefits. We should break the back of the pharma, hospital, insurance conglomerate that's destroying healthcare, empower doctors, empower nurses, empower patients. We can do that. We have plans to do that. But we need leadership. And with all due respect to the former president, when I ran for Congress in 2018, it was in January of 17, when he first got into office, that he was saddling up with Paul Ryan and a bunch of the establishment Republicans in Washington, and they failed to pass healthcare reform. We could have actually done it at that moment, and we didn't. And we're now 6 years, almost 7 years later, and we're all paying the price. $24,000 the average family of 4 is paying out of pocket or through your employer for these insurance plans. And you have then a what? How big is the deductible? How big is the copay? Right? So you're still out of pocket. That's not right. We can fix it. I know Governor DeSantis will make that happen, and I'll be right alongside of him in Congress to make that happen.
Yeah, one of the things we did in Florida was, okay, part of the reason costs go down at anything is because somebody's offering something for a certain price, and then a competitor can come and provide a similar product at a lower price. People choose the lower, and then they have to compete against each other. When there's no competition, there's no incentive to have a price that's affordable. So we have price transparency. They have to publish their prices for things. So if you need your hip replaced, you can look. If you're in Orlando, you can see one side of town for this place would be this. This might on the other side may be that. So that kind of brings some transparency. The problem, though, is that in and of itself is not enough, because if it's going to be paid by a third party, then what do you care necessarily as the one? I mean, once you're past your deductible, it doesn't matter. So we did a thing for state employees called shared savings. So if you, as a state employee, if you need something and you choose something that's cheaper, the amount that they're saving, they actually refund some of that to you in lower premiums. So we've saved millions and millions of dollars because you're taking the price transparency, but you're giving the consumer an incentive to actually shop for something cheaper, because the consumer benefits when they get something cheaper. Just doing the price transparency in and of itself is not going to be enough unless there's a benefit. Yes. Do what Florida did. You go back 20-some years, elections in Florida were a joke. I mean, Pete Bush versus Gore, hanging chads. When I got into office, 2018, they had problems in South Florida in that election. So I came in, I removed 2 supervisors of elections in South Florida. We have eliminated ballot harvesting. We've eliminated Zucker bucks. We have universal voter ID, including if you vote absentee, you have to show ID. And then we created an election crimes unit in state government that investigates and prosecutes voter fraud. And part of the problem is that some of these local DAs, they don't want to do the election stuff. And so, okay, well, if there's not going to be anybody ever held accountable, then that's a license to break the law. So when we enacted that, they started bringing cases against illegal aliens now we had very few in Florida relative, but for the 2020 election, they found some illegal aliens. They found some people that have been convicted of sex offenses, which are not eligible to vote in Florida if that's the case. We found some people that had voted in multiple jurisdictions, New York and Florida, whatnot. So they brought cases. And I can tell you, 2022 election, I mean, I think people said, here are the rules. You will be prosecuted if you break the rules. And so no one tried anything in that election. Now, so that's the model. Not every state has done that, though. So the question is, as your nominee, how are you going to do it? And one of the things that I think Donald Trump is not, he's asked this question: how are you going to ensure the election? And he can never give an answer about what he's going to do. He'll complain about the past. He has no plan as to how to do it. Well, we're going to do all this. There's only a handful of states that are going to be competitive. We're going to have separate organizations in each state keyed toward what the laws are in those states. So if Nevada has ballot harvesting, I don't like that, but I'm going to do it. And we're not going to fight with one hand tied behind our back. We're going to be out there and get it done. If you have these Zucker bucks, we're going to do that. Again, not what you should have. You should do like Florida and eliminate it. If they send everyone a mail ballot, we are going to work to get people to turn that in too. What you don't want to do, like we can all say, like some people say, and I'd be fine with it, let's just only do one election day again. Let's do that. And maybe if you're sick or you're old, you get an absentee, but everyone else should have to go to the polls. I'd be totally fine with that. But here's the thing. If that's not the law, if the law has in some state 3 weeks of early voting and they have mass absentee, we should tell people to go in and get those votes in. Don't wait all your vote till Election Day. I used to go when I was running for re-election, and I would go to the crowd. I'd be like, how many of you are, so once we got into, before we got into early voting, like, how many of you are going to vote with absentee? Very few. How many are going to vote early in person? Very few. How many are going to wait till Election Day? Like 90% are raising their hand. Once we get into the early vote window in Florida, I'd ask the question. I was like, guys, you're going to pass the polling place right after this event. Just go get the vote in. Go do it. And then people started doing that. And we killed the Democrats in early in-person vote, and then we killed them on Election Day too, but we used to lose that early in-person vote to Democrats. We blew it out of the water. So I just think we're going to have plans in each state unique to those states. We are going to maximize opportunities to deliver Republican votes.
Well, the key is also engagement. All of you engaging and making sure locally what you're doing. I went and testified in the Texas legislature as a member of Congress saying, guys, we need to actually get legislation in place in 2021. And we did, and we made a lot of reforms in Texas. But I'd just say about the governor, the proof is in the pudding, results. The governor won by 1.5 million votes in Florida. Would you have guessed 5 years ago that a Republican governor would win by 1.5 million votes? But he did that. And he won 62% of Hispanic voters, and he won 50% of single female voters. They did that by getting an operation mobilized and by leading. And you showed you can get it done. And all the elections were finished the night of the election, right? The results, we knew what the results were, amazingly.
Yeah, we know. So in Florida, it's neat. So what we do is there's a running tally of who votes. So, if you request an absentee ballot and you send it in, it's logged that you voted. Like, you are a Republican, and it doesn't say who you voted for, but just the fact that you voted. If your neighbor goes and votes early in person, that will show up in there. So you're seeing how many Democrats are sending in mail ballots, how many Republicans on a daily basis, independent. And then once it gets to 7 o'clock on election night, it's done. It's capped. So there's no new votes out there. It's all what's logged. So that's all transparent. People can follow it, all these things. And that's really a model now. We're not going to have federal government regulate elections because the left will take that advantage of that. So it's got to be at the state level. We have a good model, but I think we can compete in any of these models. Even if they're ones we don't like, we can compete with it. But what you can't do, I think, is what Donald Trump told people in 2020 to say, don't ever send in a mail ballot. I mean, we had elderly people who didn't want to go to the polls because they were concerned about COVID. Why would you tell them not to send in a mail ballot? Then maybe they didn't vote at all. Use whatever's available. Get whatever system you want in each state. And I want to mitigate any chance of fraud. But some of these states aren't where we want them to be. Let's take advantage of that too. Let's not just sit on our hands.
Last question, ladies and gentlemen. This is our last question.
So, in terms of questions on right to life, this is interesting how this has shaken out in this campaign because I've enacted pro-life protections in Florida, the heartbeat bill, similar to what Iowa did, and that was something that a lot of folks were in pro-life were very happy with. Donald Trump has attacked those heartbeat protection bills as being a terrible, terrible thing that he says. And I think to myself, I'm like, wait a minute, didn't you run saying that you were pro-life? In fact, if you go back and watch his speech on the March for Life in 2020, January of 2020, watch what he says. Listen, read what he said. I mean, he's talking about, every life's a gift from God, that the unborn is made in the image of God in the mother's womb, that you have a responsibility, to protect and nurture and create a culture of life. So that's what he was saying. Now he's saying it's a terrible thing to enact pro-life protections. Was he not being honest then, or has he changed his position? I don't see how you can go from that in January of 2020 on a fundamental issue to now attacking people like Kim Reynolds, attacking me, attacking people who have just stood up to advance a culture of life. And that's just something that I think a lot of Iowans are going to look at and render a judgment on because I just don't understand. I understand not every state is going to do it the same. I mean, there's different regions of the country that would not embrace what Texas has done or what Iowa's done. But when states are doing it with strong support in the legislature, like they had in Iowa, why would you attack that as a terrible thing? And you know what? Democrats are using Trump's words to weaponize against pro-lifers now. And every initiative that's done, referendum, debate on this, everybody on the left who wants abortion up till birth, they're going to cite Donald Trump against pro-lifers with his doing. So what he did was very, very damaging.
I want to say one thing on this issue. It's such an important issue, and thanks for asking about it. Because the governor has done something that I think is unique here. because he's being attacked from two different sides with respect to his leadership here. First of all, he stood up and he signed the legislation in Florida this spring and worked to get a heartbeat bill enacted. All this is doing, by the way, is getting us in line with the rest of Western civilization, right? Europe and everywhere else, where we say, look, you know, there is a reasonable limit here, and let's have that conversation. And let's do it, since the court rightly said this belongs to the people. It's not going to be decided by jurists. We decide. We figure out these complicated issues. The governor signed that law, despite the fact, and he doesn't have to get into this, but I will, despite the fact that there were major mega donors who are now all too happy to have Nikki Haley begging them for money, who was offering him tens of millions of dollars into super PACs to say back away from the issue in Florida. He told them to pound sand, and he stood up and defended the people of Florida. Conversely, he's been attacked from the pro-life right. So have I. Because he has stood up to say, you know what? You know, I'm not going to go push a big national ban like certain people like Lindsey Graham were doing last August, saying we need to have a big national 15-week ban. Because that's not what we got out of the court. The court rightly returned it to the people. Let's have a debate about how we can create a culture of life. Because that's what's important here, not the politics. It's every baby, it's every precious life given to us from God. And let's stand behind the babies and the mamas. Let's be there for them. Let's be there with care. Let's be there with adoption support. Let's be there as communities rallying around families rather than making this a big political issue to be decided in the courts. And that is what the governor has done, and I'm proud to support him for it.
Anyone else? Yes, sir. Oh, no, I think it's a great, universities. We know the universities have had problems for a long time. But what was happening on those universities after Hamas attacked Israel, that really revealed sickness and rot in these universities that is really, really above and beyond what even most people who were critical thought. And I noticed in some of these universities said, well, a lot of these are foreign students, here on foreign visas. You don't have a right to study in this country as a foreigner. It's a privilege. And if you're going to take that privilege and you're going to come here and make common cause with Hamas, I'm canceling your visa and I am sending you home. The other thing is okay, what's the purpose of a university? And yes, look, these like Harvard and these private ones, they're basically hedge funds at this point with their endowments, with like indoctrination camps attached to the hedge fund, and they've kind of really gone in a different mission. Doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean we should be funding that from the federal government, of course not. But particularly on these state universities that you fund here in Iowa, we fund in Florida, it's like, okay, what's the purpose? Why are they there? How is it benefiting the state? And I think it benefits the state and the people when you're focusing the university on its classical mission, search for truth, academic rigor, preparing students to be citizens of the republic, not to use it to shoehorn an ideology into all the students like so many have done. So in Florida, we've done a number of things. One, we have eliminated this DE&I from our public universities. So they say it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. They try to make it sound like it's positive, but in reality, the way it's applied, it's discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination. That's DEI in practice, and that does not have a place in our public universities. It's divisive. It's treating people, putting them into groups and dividing on ethnicity or race or gender or whatever they want to do, and it's subordinating merit and achievement. And that's bad in academia. It's bad in the military. It's had bad effects in corporate America. We have to be a society based on merit, and nobody should be discriminated against because of the color of their skin or these other things that they can't control. And that goes for discriminating against somebody who's a racial minority, but it also means you don't discriminate against someone because they're white. That's not all of a sudden fine. And so we need to have that principle applied throughout across the board. Whereas I think DE&I is basically saying that they can discriminate against Asian Americans, like getting into Harvard. as an Asian American, they downgrade you, right? Because they want to have fewer Asian Americans. They're happy to do that. They're happy to go with anti-white discrimination. That's fine for them. But it's not good for our country, and so we're not going to do that. So we got rid of that in Florida. That was this year. Texas, I think, has followed suit. There's going to be a lot that we're going to have to continue to follow up on, because I think this is a hobby horse of the left, and they are going to try to push it. The other thing we did in Florida, all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be let go for poor performance. So, we want people doing a good job, we want them to do, but to try to use that position to just to politic or to do some of that, that's just not in the interest of taxpayers. But federally, we're going to do two things. One, the funding is not just going to flow to these universities. They need to be behaving in ways that merit support of the American people. Two, student loans. It's wrong to have a truck driver have to pay the student loan for someone with a degree in gender studies. Taxpayers should not pay back the student loans. But the universities have gotten fat and happy with all this loan money, so we're going to make the universities responsible for backing the loans instead of taxpayers. That's going to create very good incentives for the type of programs that they're doing, and I think it will be better for students, and you will end up having much less. That final thing is accreditation. This is kind of an in-the-weeds issue. Universities get accredited by who? These are just random groups that the federal government has approved to be accreditors. Well, those accreditors are pushing them in the direction that we've seen universities go. We're going to approve creditors that push in the opposite direction. So instead of saying that you can only get accredited if you do DEI, we will say you will not get accredited if you do DEI. So we're going to be able to change the landscape through accreditation. Trump had the opportunity to do it because literally it's just unilateral. He never touched it. He never did anything on the universities. It was a huge missed opportunity for 4 years.
Well, I was out a minute, and I'll give it back to the governor because I think we're going to have to give him the last word before we wind up. But I just want to say two things. One, on the universities, I totally agree with the governor. I introduced an amendment a few weeks ago that unfortunately we couldn't get offered, but we will, that would have said if you take money, your university, you're taking all these foreign dollars, that you don't get any more federal money, and kind of cut that off. And man, my phone was lighting up from all of the government affairs people from all the universities because they love that money. They love to get it. So we need to hip check them. We need to stop this federal money flowing into these universities that have these billion-dollar endowments. But you also ask about what can we do to be positive and sort of incentive-based. And I'd say two answers. One, talk about the universities. It's the University of Iowa, right, that has the hospital that overlooks the football field, right, with the kids that can, like that's the kind of, aspirational thing you want to see your universities do, right? That's something that we notice and take notice in Texas, where we're seeing that and going, man, what a great idea. What a wonderful thing for a university to do. And so that's a great thing, more of that. And then the other thing is, and I'm going to say it because I'm here to do it, elect this man so that we can have our kids look up to our president and want to follow a leader forward.
Well, thank you. So we're asking if you're supporting us, God bless you. We're asking for your support on January 15th. You guys have the opportunity to change the trajectory of this country. The media is not going to change the trajectory of this country in a positive way. Doing what they say is not going to change the trajectory. It's doing what you think is right for the future of the country. And all the stuff that people want to say, that all ends on January 15 when Iowans get to make their decision. And so I'm humbly asking for your support. Be an advocate for us if you're supporting us. Rope in a neighbor, rope in a family member, bring some people out there. We've created a massive number of supporters. I don't think anyone's been able to get as many commitments to caucus a month before a caucus as we've had. We're adding more every day. Hopefully some of you will sign these cards when you go out. But we are doing what it takes to win here in Iowa. And it also helps that I'm the candidate that's most in tune with the values of the people of Iowa, that I have a record that backs that up. So now's the time. We're asking for your support. We will get the job done. You will not regret this. It's funny, one of the things that I see in Florida where, I ran for governor in 18. I won a primary by a lot, but it was still, it was, the other guy got a lot of votes too. And people were like, they come up to me and the best thing, say, yeah, I didn't vote for you in the primary, but that was the worst vote I ever took. You've done such a great job. I'm so happy, all this stuff. So we're gonna do you proud. We understand we've got a country to save. We understand the principles that need to guide us on this mission, and we're not going to be denied the opportunity to stand up for freedom and to preserve and correct the problems in what should be and will be, again, the greatest country in the history of the world. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you all.